Russia is dangerously close to declaring war on NATO with its recent covert actions, and no one is talking about it. There's been a lot of talk this election year about how Russia just wants to play nice and even partner with the US. If only we would stop supporting Ukraine. It would be like the roaring 1990s all over again. Remember what it was like to have a Russia that was friendly to the West? Tom Clancy even wrote a book about it that envisioned the US and Russia teaming up against China. These illusions are dangerous because Russia is no casual rival. It's a determined enemy, and Putin's latest moves are getting close to what we in the US military would call open acts of war. Why is nobody talking about this? Probably because we just went through a major 2024 election. But the Wall Street Journal is reporting that Russia's GRU intelligence operatives have been slipping incendiary devices into air cargo headed for the US and Canada. 2 of these packages even exploded in sorting centers in the UK and Germany this past July. Fortunately, they didn't go off while in the air, but the message here is chillingly clear. For those clinging to the hope that Russia wants to play nice, here's your wake-up call. Putin, a KGB throwback still bitter about the Soviet Union's fall, has a deep grudge against the US. He might consider friendship, but only if America first backs down on supporting democracies like Ukraine, Poland, and the Baltic states. But with the US support of Ukraine, Putin's response has been to let his intelligence services loose on the US. This explosive parcel stunt, well, it's just a chapter in a larger sabotage campaign Russia's been running since the beginning of the year. The Washington Examiner actually called this back in April. Since then, Russia has been targeting warehouses, factories, and any site tied to Ukraine's defense efforts, aiming to frighten the West without prompting a NATO counterattack. It's frankly embarrassing for US deterrence that Russia thinks it can mess with our air cargo without fearing serious repercussions. All 3 of Russia's major intelligence branches, the GRU, SVR, and FSB, are involved in these stunts. But the GRU takes the spotlight for the most extreme operations. GRU Director Igor Kostyukov is infamous for his no-nonsense approach to chaos. In fact, his agents were behind the 2018 nerve agent attack in the UK that ended up killing a British civilian. A brutal reminder of the GRU's collateral damage policy. Attempted assassinations of the CEO of the German defense manufacturer Rheinmetall, mysterious fires breaking out at a US artillery shell manufacturer in Pennsylvania, the only artillery shell provider to Ukraine, by the way. North of Fort Liberty, formerly Fort Bragg, North Carolina, an active duty US Army Special Operations colonel noticed 2 men on his property taking photos of his home and his children. While the spouse called 911, the soldier went out to confront the men. The men spoke in broken English. It would later be discovered that the men were Chechen Russians, and when the conversation turned violent, the army soldiers shot and killed one of the suspected intruders. The man's name was Ramzan Daryev, and he had no identification on him and was not dressed in any type of uniform that would identify him as a utility worker, which Daryev's family later claimed. The only way we know his name is because international identification documents were found in his truck nearly 250 yards away, parked on the roadway. The local sheriff said Daryev was working as a subcontractor for Utilities One, a company based in New Jersey, at the time of his death. The shooting happened on May 3rd and is still under investigation, but U.S. Special Operations soldiers around the country have experienced strange interactions in recent years that they say involve suspicious Russian surveillance of them and their families. A string of recent Russian sabotage operations in Europe also has a NATO military alliance on alert. In 2020, but picking up after 2022, the GRU, Russia's military intelligence agency, founded the Service for Special Activities, also called Unit 54654. This unit is designed to build a network of illegals operating under what Russia calls full legalization, the ability to pass muster even under scrutiny from the FBI. In the US intelligence community, call these people cutouts or knocks for non-official cover officers. Unit 54654 recruits contractors through front companies, keeping their names and details out of government records, and embeds its officers in private companies. That may be the case with our special operations soldier in North Carolina, who killed the Chechen Russian on his property earlier this year. And overseeing it all is Nikolai Patrushev, Putin's hardline security advisor with a bone-deep disdain for America and, according to the Washington Examiner, what he sees as the Anglo-Saxon power structure. A sharp and ruthless strategist, Patrushev just shifted to a new role as Putin's aide, which lets him direct even more intelligence moves. Meanwhile, his old role went to Sergei Shugo, Putin's friend and former defense minister. Add in the fact that Patrushev's son recently got promoted to deputy prime minister, and it's clear that Patrushev's influence is alive and well in the Kremlin. But this latest move to risk blowing up civilian airliners over the Atlantic is crossing a line. The US should authorize Ukraine to hit Russian military sites using long-range US weapons. Because if we don't push back hard, Putin will feel emboldened to keep this covert war going, full steam, right alongside his more obvious war in Ukraine. Look, I'm all for diplomacy and dialogue, but there comes a time when action speaks louder than carefully worded condemnations. This isn't just Russia being spicy with their foreign policy. This is Russia begging to see what they can get away with. And frankly, they've gotten away with enough. Russia is not an ally to freedom-loving people. As long as the Putin regime is in power, Russia will continue to push the limits of what it thinks it can get away with. And if we don't push back, the next covert attack may take American lives. That's it for today. Subscribe if you're not already. It really helps the channel grow. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Slava Ukraini.